page. Okay, so there's 4 sessions for today with various sort of topics set up. The first thing we're going to talk about is physics properties and how to manage sort of physics related stuff. And we're going to start talking about games and things like that side of that. And then we're going to move to input. So input in this context really means like, how do I get information from the user and then use that information to do stuff in my game? So traditional inputs are things like the keyboard or the mouse, but in fact, like computers can get information from all sorts of different kinds of input devices. So eye trackers, joysticks, whatever. We're going to move later in the afternoon to moving a character around. This will be using 3D math to actually move a character. So if you haven't messed with something called vectors, you'll mess with something called vectors. It might sound scary, but I promise you it's really not that bad. And then placing objects on the screen so we can complete a quest, because we're trying to get to the point where we can have like a quest that we can complete inside of our game and then go from there. All right, so that's sort of the schedule for today. The person leading it in the morning is going to be William. And William is set up and ready to go, I suspect. So any questions this morning before we get going? Comments, concerns, other issues? Typical silence of the online conference that we all know and love. So, okay, all right, William, I'll let you take it away. So,
all right. So, good morning, everybody. So before we get started on actually working with the physics in the scene, I know that everyone has been working on their projects so far. And I know that some people have already started dipping their toes a little bit into stuff ahead of us. So how is everyone doing with their scene so far? And has anyone tried messing with the physics so far? I see a couple of hands. I see a thumbs down.
I tried a little bit yesterday, but it was just, basic property stuff. I didn't get into any of the code on the actual game side of it. So
all right, so we're going to do a little bit of the code as part of this, but we're also going to be doing some of that more throughout some of the upcoming sessions.
My person fell through my mountain.
That's not how you want physics to work. So
no,
that'll be one of the things we're trying to fix by the time we're done with it. So unless you really want your guys to go through mountains, in which case, great game. You're doing it. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'll start by sharing my screen here. I will at points throughout this, I will pop on the screen reader, but for right now, I'm gonna keep it off and I'll just try and audio describe what I'm doing. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And right now I have Quorum Studio up. I habitually have forgotten to zoom this in enough that it can actually be seen on Zoom. I think I've done it this time. Can everyone see the code here? And is it readable?
Looks good on my screen.
Okay. So with that, let's get started with working with our scene. For this one in particular, I have grabbed one of our projects that we have up on the EPIQ repo that we have as solutions for the previous lessons. And I'm using this one to work off of. So if you're using one as well, you'll probably recognize this scene. And right now for our scene, we have this sort of medieval sort of environment. We have this smithy off to the left side. We have our sort of castle-ish thing in the back. Its quality as a castle is somewhat dubious because it has a bunch of futuristic sci-fi turrets on it and has a Stargate within. And we can even see that there is a ship flying off in the background. So there's some kind of like sci-fi, cyberpunk, medieval punk, some kind of punk. We can probably use punk to describe this somehow. We have a very unique aesthetic going for our game. And right now, for the characters in our game, I'm going to select the layer 3D and I'm going to move down, and I have here one of my characters. This is the player character. I'm going to move my my minimized zoom view of people was covering up my properties. I had to move that over here. When I tried to select the alien, I have instead selected the floor. And wait, I know this is something that's already come up a little bit, but do people understand why when I was on the alien, I just selected the floor instead?
Because it was bigger, right?
Yeah, so it's that we have this floor object, which is huge. In this particular game, it's just one square that we just made, just like a green square. We just scaled up to be absolutely massive. If we look into properties, it's X scale and Z scale are 500. So this is 500 units of square just going in, this flat square just stretching out on the horizon. And importantly, it's intersecting with the alien that I wanted to actually select. So when I press my enter key, I have selected all of the things in that spot, of which this is one. If I want to get to the other thing that I've selected, how do I do that?
Tab.
key.
Yep, tab key. So now I press the tab key and I'm onto my alien. This isn't anything new so far, but I feel like it's good to review this stuff as we go. As we can see in the properties here, I'm gonna press Control P, jump to the properties. Right now, this character's name is alien. It has some values on it for its position, its scale. We haven't done anything to its rotation yet. The color is unchanged for this particular thing because it's a complex model, so it doesn't use color in the same way that the floor did. If I actually tab back to the floor, I'm gonna press Escape to exit the properties, tab again, because I still haven't selected. I can't actually see that the color of the square is set. This is something I can modify because it's just a basic shape. Tab back to the alien. The things that we're going to be talking about today are the physics portions of this properties dialog here. Under the physics, we have a few different options. The first is a checkbox that says physics enabled, and then responsiveness values. These are 3 radio buttons, one that is unmovable, non-responsive, responsive, and then we have 3 fields: mass, friction, and restitution. Before we start changing anything, let's talk a little bit about what each of these are. So the first one's the most obvious. What does the checkbox that says physics enabled do?
So it
Allows
just
physics to be applied to the object.
It makes it so that so long as physics is on in our game, this object will respect all of the rules of physics. And as far as having physics on in our game goes, if we look at our code, I'm going to go to main.quorum here. In our file that's already provided when we load this scene, this particular section of code right here just has something to load the scene. On your projects, if you made a scene 3D application, you probably also have some code already that says enable physics 3D, and you have something to set the gravity. In my example, that's not there yet, so we'll end up adding that as part of the lesson, but that is going to be important for our stuff. Not just that our objects are responsive to physics, but that our game is responsive to physics as well. Basically, we have turned on. Jumping back to the scene view, I'm going to select the alien again and jump back to its properties. Let's talk about the responsiveness section. In this section, there are, once again, these 3 options: unmovable, non-responsive, and responsive. Does anyone know what these mean?
Yeah. So if it's responsive, then whenever you have a collision, it'll respond to that with the relevant events.
Yep, that's right. So if it's responsive means that it is capable of being acted upon by physics. So that means that things can collide into it and then will move away. If there is gravity, gravity will cause it to drop. It is responsive to things in the physics engine. What does unmovable and non-responsive mean? These two are a little more subtle in how they're different from each other. Let's start with unmovable. What does unmovable mean?
It's going to hold position
Yeah. So
regardless of what.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say regardless of what collides with it.
That's right. So an unmovable object is just a thing anchored in space, right? It is a building. It is the world. It is something that things can bounce into it. Things can interact with it by colliding with it, but the thing itself is not going to move. And that means that physics can't move it. And that also means that if you tried to move it through external means, it can't apply external forces by running into things, because the physics engine, as far as it's concerned, it doesn't move. So there's no reason to calculate that. It's partially a performance thing. This is what you're using for, like I said, buildings, the world, stuff that doesn't move in any way. Its only interaction with physics is other things running into it. What does non-responsive mean?
if something tries to collide with it, it's just going to pass through?
Sort of. It is non-responsive, so that is true. Yes, if something bounces into it, this will not react to other things colliding with it because it does not respond to outside forces. In a similar way, it won't respond to something like gravity. Gravity will not take a non-responsive object and make it drop because it does not respond to gravity. But that's also true of unmovable objects, right? So what's the difference between unmovable and non-responsive? Does anyone know?
It won't trigger collision events?
That's a good question. I actually have to think if that's true. I actually think that it can trigger collision events, and there's a particular reason for it. The difference between unmovable and non-responsive is that compared to an unmovable object, which is something like a building, it is anchored in place, it's not going anywhere. A non-responsive object is something which can move, but it's not due to external physics forces. So you might think of something like you're playing Super Mario, you're playing a platformer, and you have a platform that moves back and forth. No matter what you do with Mario, you can jump into it, you can run into it, you can throw Koopa shells at it, whatever. This platform won't move due to anything you're doing to it, but it's still responsive to physics in the sense that you can tell it to have physical force moving it around. Another example is you might take something like, suppose I have a ship and I'm designing like a dogfighter sort of game, like so I'm shooting things from the ship. The bullets that I'm launching from it, I might say that I want to be non-responsive because I don't want the bullets to fall due to gravity. I don't want the bullets to like bounce off of things. All I want is the bullets to move forward in a straight line until it collides with something, and then I'll use the collision events to do something with it. I want it to respond to physics enough that I can say, have a velocity. Let the physics engine calculate where you're going, but I don't want you to interact with other things along the way. This is the most esoteric of the three options. You don't use it all that often compared to unmovable, which you'll use all the time for just the ground, your buildings, stuff like that, your level elements that are static, and then responsive, which you'll use for your player characters, your objects that needs to bounce and move, and things that you can push and shove. But does that sort of make sense as to what non-responsive means in that context?
Yep.
All right. Part of my pauses are so that I can ask questions interactively. Part of it so I can just take a drink of water. So it works out. We have three other fields on our physics properties here. The first one is mass. Mass is pretty straightforward. It is a measure of mass in the same sense that it would be in physics broadly. It is a measure of the material. It's a combination of its size and its density to indicate basically just how much stuff is there, right? By default, an object is going to end up having just a mass of 1 whenever you set it to be responsive, because it needs to have some level of mass in order to calculate the stuff. And generally speaking, you're probably okay to leave that as it is, unless you want to change something to fine tune how your physics feels. But leaving it its default value will be enough that you can get basic physics responses the way that you might expect. If we were to increase this, then it will be much harder for other objects to move on it, or to move it, to act on it, etc. Friction is what you would expect friction to be. It's a measure of how much friction is applied when it scrapes against other things. Or basically, is this really smooth? Does it just kind of slide along surfaces? Or is this sort of rough, where once it's going across surfaces, it's going to lose some of its speed and some of its momentum as it's being pushed across things? Restitution is a funny name. This one's less obvious than the other two, I think. Does anyone know what restitution is?
Hey, rude.
Bounciness.
Bounciness, that's right. Restitution is a measure of, if I just drop this thing on the ground, how hard is it going to bounce back up? So if I had something that had a restitution value of 1, because this is another one that's similar to color. We measure this as a value between 0 and 1 for the most part. If this had a restitution value of 1, and I dropped it and it hits the ground, it's going to bounce all the way back up to where it started. It has a 100% bounciness. No momentum is lost as it transfers back upwards. And if we put it even higher than that, you can get something truly ridiculous, as if you put a ball with restitution of 1.5, it actually gains speed every time it bounces. So it'll just keep going higher and higher into the sky every single time that it bounces upwards. So any questions about the properties on the physics side of this before we continue onward? Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do then is I'm going to start by taking my game and actually not just talking about the physics properties, but actually setting something. So right now, I'm currently on my alien figure. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the name of this character. So I'm in the project properties, or sorry, the object properties, and I'm going to change the name from alien to player. This is going to be my player character. It's going to be easier for me to interact with this if I have a really clear name for it, and it'll become obvious later why that is. But I recommend that for objects in your game that are really important that you have to interact with in some way. So this might be the player. This might also be in my example. I'm going to leave the alien for a moment here, and I'm going to move over to, in this building, I have a character inside the smithy. I'm going to select, I'm going to tab until I reach them. There's a bunch of different objects intersecting here, so I have to tab several times. I eventually find that I've named this character NPC. Does anyone know what NPC stands for? Really common in gaming terminology, but if you're not a gamer, then it's probably
non-playing character.
Yep, non-player character. Basically, it's just, I am not directly controlling this character, but they are still a character. I can interact with them in some way usually, or they are somehow relevant to the environment in a way that they are, they might just be sort of set dressing. They're here just to sort of make the world feel more alive, but typically this is something like they're a quest giver. They're someone you talk to. They have information. Under certain circumstances, non-player characters could be enemies, right? They might be the Goombas marching at me in a game of Mario, or any number of games that, you know, you end up fighting something, right? So I have a meaningful name, so I'll be able to find this guy later. For right now, I'm going to move back to my alien, and let's change the other properties on this. Right now, I want this to be my player character. So out of the physics properties I have right now, currently physics is enabled on it. It is currently set to be unmovable for its responsiveness. Its mass is 1, its friction is 0, its restitution is 0. What feels like good physics properties I should set for my player character? Does anyone have any ideas as to what I should change here?
It should be responsive.
Right. Let's start by making it responsive. Why? And we'll review why responsive. Would it be okay if I made this? It makes sense. I don't want it to be unmovable. I should be able to move the player. I could move a non-responsive object. Should I do that instead?
Would that be no, because then you wouldn't be able to like control the player and move it with like the external force?
You can't detect what the player is doing if you make it non-responsive.
Right. So the big thing that we're going to run into is if we make the character non-responsive instead of responsive, we can still move the character through code exclusively, right? If something like, you know, if a train came and hit my character and they were non-responsive, the non-responsive character wouldn't move. They do not respond to the train. They have no care for it. If they're responsive, the character will properly get sent flying if a train hits them. Depending on your game, that might be cool, but to have them just shrug off a train. But I know that if I make a game, I want the train to move them. I want to have them sent hurtling through the sky, probably add a sound that makes them scream as they go, because that's half the fun. The big thing about if I make this character non-responsive, though, is if I, in the code, set some velocity on this character. If they're non-responsive or if they're responsive, this character will move if I programmatically set a velocity on them, not if other things act on them, but if I, the programmer, tell it to. But really importantly, if it's non-responsive, it doesn't care about the other physics objects in the world, which means that among other things, it won't have gravity affect it, which I would like for the player character. And really importantly, my character will be able to walk through walls because my character doesn't care about other physics objects, which include the walls. So again, hey, maybe that's cool. But for right now, let's assume that we want walls to be an object. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to set this character to be responsive. And then one by one, we'll just look at the other values. Do we want to change the mass on this character? It's currently a value of 1.0. Do we want to change this or do we feel like that's okay?
I guess that depends on if you want, you know, like if you're gonna have him jump off a cliff at some point, you might ask to be different to react to gravity, but
That's a fair response. Basically, the answer to this
if
question
he's
is
just trogging around, then no.
sure. That's a pretty good answer. It's basically just kind of dependent on what we want to do with it. I'm going to say that for right now, if I just want this guy to walk around the environment, which is where I'm going to start with, it feels like having a default mass is fine. I'm not super worried about trying to figure out what's going to happen if something runs into him right now, because at the moment, the only thing that's going to be moving is him. I might come back and revisit this later, and that's okay. But for right now, mass of 1.0 seems fine. Friction value is currently 0. First, before I even ask what we should change this to, does it kind of matter? Does this feel like something we need to change?
Unless he's moving too fast or too slow. Maybe.
The thing about the friction here is that because of how we're going to end up controlling this character, or at least how I'm planning on controlling him, the friction's probably not going to matter that much, because the friction only matters if you're really letting something go and you're just kind of letting it have physics act upon it unbounded. In my stuff, I'm most likely for the player character to start out with for just walking around. The way that I'm going to walk around is going to be really controlled. I'm going to purposely set an exact speed on him, and I'm going to take that speed away when I stop moving him. But that being said, if I leave the friction at 0, again, this train that I have from somewhere, they just keep letting trains in on this pesky field. If this train hits this character and he starts going, I am not going to stop. Not for a very, very long time. There are some forces in the engine that will slow the speed of something, even outside of friction. But this character is going to be sliding along the ground for quite a while. For right now, it's probably fine to leave the friction for 0 for what I'm working with to start. But that's something that we should probably keep an eye on if in the future our character just goes sliding and we want to do something about that. Other thing is restitution. I want my character to walk around the environment right now, or at least that's what I'm building up to. Do I care about the restitution right now?
Did you say what restitution was?
Yeah, so as a reminder, restitution is bounciness. That is, you throw them down to the ground, they hit the ground or a wall or whatever, and this is how hard they bounce back. So for
Not
walking
unless
around,
you were designing a teddy bear.
what was that?
Not unless you're designing a teddy bear or something.
Yep. So for walking around, it's probably fine just leave a restitution 0. Basically, if we hit a wall, we're not going to bounce off of it. We're just going to kind of stop. This also depends a little bit on if you hit really hard or if you drop against the ground really hard. Even a restitution value of 0, you're not going to just stick. You will bounce a little bit, but the value of restitution is going to dramatically adjust how much that is. So basically at this point, it seems like all we really need to worry about right now is physics is turned on, it is responsive, and the rest of the default values seem fine for what we're doing. And that's going to be true for a lot of things that you'll end up working with in the scene editor. You care about its responsiveness, you want to make sure the physics is enabled if you're using it. Don't worry about the other details unless they seem to become relevant while you're working on stuff. From here, if I build and run this game, would I expect anything to happen?
Yes.
No.
If you've made them responsive, won't they respond to gravity? And maybe they're not standing on anything on mine.
That is true. So if they are responsive, they will respond to gravity. And that does mean if there is nothing below them that is physics enabled, then they are going to just fall. For my particular example, I'm going to run this game. And in my stuff right now, nothing is currently happening. My character is just standing there, unmoving. And if I look back at the scene editor, I'm going to tab back to the ground here. Got to get folks back on the editor. And on my game, the floor currently is physics enabled, and it is unmovable. So it is a physical object. This is something that my character can stand on. But I'm actually going to turn this off. I'm going to remove the physics enabled on the floor. I'm going to go ahead and close the project I had. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it again. My character is actually still not going anywhere.
Dave. Ruth.
And the reason for this is probably a little bit of a trick on my end. I mentioned this briefly before. In your code, if you're using one of the templates that we provided, your code already comes with a line that says enable physics 3D, and it has gravity already set in the code. In my code, I don't have that right now. So let's go ahead and let's add that and let's see what happens. So I've gone now to main.quorum. I'm currently in the create game action, and I am going to add a new line of code, enable physics 3D true. If I run this right now, will it be different than before? What will happen compared to before?
Nothing currently.
That's right. Why will nothing happen?
It will
You haven't-
initialize, sorry,
Go ahead.
it will initialize the items, but there's no activity or no commands to move anything yet.
Right. There's still nothing that's applying anything. And importantly, I haven't even set gravity on this yet. So if I go ahead and I run this, I will see that once again,
Dave.
everything remains static. So let's go ahead and let's set gravity on this scene. I'm going to call set gravity. I believe it's set gravity 3D without looking at it.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. And so I'm going to give it right now the value of 0, -10, and 0. The reason for this is basically just because this is roughly an approximation of real world physics. In the real world, I believe it's 9.8 meters per second is the speed of gravity as measured on Earth.
9.8 meters per second squared is the acceleration.
Yes, thank you. In this case, I'm giving it -10. I actually could just change it to 9.8. So I will. And in the game engine, each unit in the 3D space is a meter. And that is for exactly this sort of reason. So it makes it easier to perform physics calculations. So basically right now I'm saying gravity should be approximately equal to that of what we'd expect here on Earth. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now my character has just fallen right through the Earth. Which again, is because not only do I have physics on now, I set my gravity on. My character is physics responsive. The floor has no physics on it whatsoever. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change the floor now. Let's go ahead and set this back to being physics enabled. I'm going to go ahead and run this again. And now my character has just sort of dropped about an inch and fallen over. My character is not off to a very good start of walking around and saving the kingdom, as they are currently lying there on the ground. Yes.
My tent is bouncing around on the screen.
That sounds very exciting. Is this?
So I set a false floor that's just a little lower than everything else because I wanted to add it after I'd already added everything else.
Sure.
So everything is falling through to the false floor, but bouncing.
I'm not sure I fall. Do you want to share your screen for a second? We can.
Sure.
I am all on board for active participation and actively working through whatever happens. Also, it just sounds really fun, so I want to see it.
I would love for other people to see what the heck I've done. So, okay, we're gonna just wait. There's my scene. Oh, come back. Here's my scene. It's happy. We're gonna run. Maybe. And my people bounce around, and my tent bounces around, and this person is spinning, and my alien disappeared. Oh, it doesn't show that. did it.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I'm sorry.
Just looking at Quorum Studio, just waiting for this game to open up.
No, I shared the wrong screen. I hate that part of Zoom. Okay. Try that again.
Oh my goodness.
Now my tent's upside down. It didn't do that last time.
That's funny.
Like
So
an
my-
earthquake.
Yes. So
Sounds like a trampoline.
yes, I've basically created a trampoline. Yep. But the alien died in the process.
Trampolines are dangerous, man.
Yay.
So a couple of things on this. One is that I think this was mentioned earlier, but compared to the 2D physics engine, the 3D physics engine is still a little rough around the edges, so you will see some oddities around it under certain circumstances. You'll see it in particular if you have, is that floor, is that just like one big square that you've scaled up, or is that, you'll really see it especially around big scaled up items, which that's what we're using in the thing that I'm running with right now, so we will probably end up seeing more of that. You will get better results if you're trying to get really accurate physical results. You get better results with making like a bunch of tiles that are all normal scaled and just like stretching them out to make a floor. But there are other things we can do about that too. And actually this kind of leads us to one of the next things I'd like to do in terms of our physics stuff. For my game, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna share my screen again.
William, just a quick question.
Sure.
So when you want to choose different items, I can't just click. Is there an easier way, or do I just have to go into item and tab through, or?
Yeah, basically the ways that you can do it right now is, like you said, you can't click on it right now. You can kind of click, but it's not working correctly at the moment. So that's something that expect that is something that we want to fix in a future release here, but didn't make it in for make it in time for this epic. The other ways that you can access something are basically what we've been doing, where we select the scene, we move the selection cursor around, and then we enter to grab something at a spot, and then tab to go through the different things.
Okay, that'd be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you're saying, the other thing is I could go into the scene, and then in the tree I can go to items and I can find it in this list, and then I can select it that way, which can be useful for certain things. You know, if I don't want to have to look, you know, move my selection cursor to find the NPC, I can just find the thing named NPC in the list here and select it. But, you know, as your game gets more and more things into it, that is increasingly less convenient to use.
Okay, yeah, I'll try moving it around.
Would there be a way for somebody who's totally blind, I get troubleshooting their own game to have, so like she's got stuff bouncing around on her screen.
Yeah.
Would there be any way for me to know that that's what's happening when I'm testing my game, or no?
Yeah. The short answer is not easily. This is something that we don't know what the best way to do that right now is. There's a few things that we can consider while we're moving forward. And some of this stuff is not stuff we're going to touch on in this lesson because it's going to come later in the week. But one of the things that comes to mind is for some basic level of figuring out what's going on with physics, we could use collision listeners to tell that something has dropped and it's touched another object. And then we could do something like play a sound or something, which is not just so that you can debug your program, but also that's what you'd expect out of a game for a lot of objects, right? You would expect that I drop something heavy on the ground and it makes, you know, a crashing noise or something. But you could also use that to output some values in terms of like, let's get its X and its Y and Z coordinate to figure out where it landed. And then if you see that it bounced multiple times, you've received multiple outputs, that gives you some sense of what's going on. But that's all, it's pretty difficult. If you have ideas or feedback on it, we would love to hear that, because that's definitely a part of the engine that we haven't figured out how to make that completely accessible yet.
All right, so I should probably stick to more of the 2D stuff.
Not necessarily. Like I think that this is true for both 2D games and 3D games. Like I think that this actually hits on one of the really major challenges of accessibility related to graphics. Like if you had a 2D game and that 2D game had 100,000 characters on it, it's really hard to give an accessible idea of the gestalt, which you might be able to do somewhat visually by just kind of scanning over it really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's true for 3D too. Like you can imagine like you can make meaningful 3D games that let you walk around. You can make meaningful 3D games that let you collect items, know where your direction is, know where you're going, and all sorts of stuff. But it's really hard to do ones like what Amanda showed, because Amanda just happened to have something where multiple things were happening on the screen all at once in different locations, and they weren't necessarily connected to each other. So the accessibility system wouldn't really know exactly what it was doing to say, like, these things fell over. They would be able to calculate that, but we wouldn't know what things to tell the user orally. So oftentimes, I think what we usually suggest is exactly what William is saying, is that the easiest way to debug is to track the values from a specific thing you want, and then the gestalt, there's not much you can do about without like just kind of debugging each one individually. And that's sort of okay, because you got to start with one piece. So I think that's usually what we recommend.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So you can do 2D and 3D, I think. It's just, it doesn't mean everything is easy, right? Like that. This is, I think, the first engine that's even tried. So there's definitely going to be things we'll want to make change in the future too. So anyway.
Okay.
Sorry, William.
No, thank you. That was a good answer. So from here, I'm gonna run this game again, and we'll see if I even get the same thing, because the physics will not act out exactly the same way each time. Go ahead and run this game again, and you can see that my character, I moved my camera over, so the character is off in the corner now. The character is wobbling a lot. Finally, they come to rest. They didn't quite fall over this time. But one important thing is that I would really prefer that this character isn't just turning and wobbling around or falling over. I would really like this character to be stable. I would expect that most games that I'm playing, if I'm using physics to move my character around, my character still knows how to stand upright. They aren't just like a pin that falls over when they touch the ground. So I would like to change that about my character. In order to do that, we're going to go do this via code. So I'm going to go back to main.quorum here. And I have, once again, my create game here. And so I'm going to ask sort of a broad question here. This is not super well focused, but we'll sort of hone in as we go. What do I need to do in order to change a physics property in code on my character? What's the first thing I probably need to do?
You need the name of the character. So you have to do that get item 3D by name. You need a variable, you need to hold the player.
That's right. The biggest thing that I have right now is I would love to just start changing some properties on my character. In the code right now, I do not have any variable for that character. My character is not represented in this code at all right now. They are part of the scene that is getting loaded on line 31, this load scene and the file that's getting in there. It lives somewhere in there, but that doesn't help me very much. I need access to that thing specifically, not the entirety of the scene that all lives in the game engine somewhere. So what we're going to do is we are going to find this character by their name. This is related to what I was talking about earlier with things that you really want to use. It'll make it a lot easier if you know what their names are. So I'm going to make an item 3D. An item 3D is any object that lives in the 3D environment. So it might be the alien model that is my player character. It might be one of the walls, or it could be the ground. It could be any of those models. It could actually be something that's not a model as well. All the things I mentioned so far are graphical. It could be an audio 3D object, a spatial sound that exists somewhere in the scene, or it could be a point light, just this ball of light just emitting light in all directions, a sphere around it. It could be none of those things. An item 3D could just be like an invisible bounding box that I have placed somewhere that I'm using to do like game logic detection. So, you know, I have just like an invisible box somewhere that when the player steps into it, I summon a train to hit them because this is the only thing I know how to do in my game. An item 3D is just anything in the 3D game, and that includes our player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do item 3D player is equal to, I'm going to get this from somewhere. I'm going to do find item 3D by name, and I'm going to give it its name player. That's find item 3D by name, and the D in the 3D is capitalized.
Have you put your using clause?
Sorry, what was that?
The using clause. You need the
That's-
library reference.
That is a great call. You are correct. I do need that. Currently, it looks like I do already have a use statement for it in this particular section of code because I was messing around with this previously. And it looks like I didn't remove that part. But you are right. You do need a use statement for that as well. So the item 3D lives in libraries.interface.item3D. So the code looks like use libraries.interface.item3D at the top of our file. I'm going to move down to this find item line of code again. And now I want to start getting some things out of it. One of the things I want to do is I want to do something about the fact that it's tipping over. But before we even do that, let's actually just get some values back out of it to see what's there. So I already know from looking at the scene editor, this has a couple of different values in it for different properties. Just to make sure I have what I think I have, I am going to take my player. I'm going to output something from it. So I'm going to do output player colon, and let's just pick one of its properties that I know about that I can output. So what's a property I know about we feel like outputting, just to see what it is. It could be anything, but we're going to make this interactive just for the heck of it.
Restitution.
Sure,
Oh.
let's get the restitution.
Yeah.
All right, so my code now, item 3D player equals find item 3D by name player. And then I output the player colon get restitution. We'll go ahead, we'll give this a run. And we can see now that I have output 0.0, which I know is what the restitution of my player is. From here, let's actually set some physics properties on it via the code. There's a couple of things I can set from the properties window, but there's a lot more that I can do from code. The reason being that some of these things are more runtime dynamic sort of things. If I want to do something like apply movement onto it, so like give it a speed and a direction, that's the sort of thing that you usually do in code because that's likely going to be changing a lot. If it's something else, like some of the more esoteric physics properties, some of those just aren't in the properties window just because there's limited space and we don't want to fill up your entire window. For right now, let's start by trying to make it so that our player doesn't turn. So inside the player, I'm going to use code completion to see if I can find this. There is a function that's used to indicate whether or not it can rotate. And if I just start looking through code completion, there are a lot of physics related things in here and a lot of not physics related things in here. Just scrolling through, some of the things I can see that appear to be physics related include applying angular impulse, apply damping, apply force, apply linear impulse, apply torque. This right here can rotate, Boolean flag. This is what I want for my physics engine to respect that I really don't want this guy to wobble anymore. What happens if I say player colon can rotate and I set that to be true? Apologies. The way that you access code completion is if you have a variable, you can press colon and that'll bring it up automatically. Or if you're in a position where you're in the right place, but it's not there, you can press control space and that'll bring it up. Yeah, so with this player can rotate true, what happens in my game now? What has changed?
You can't rotate in any direction?
That would be true if I set this to false. Right now, I actually haven't changed anything yet. Can rotate true means it can rotate. It can do the same thing it's already doing, but you're right. I'll set this to false. Sorry, I like asking trick questions. If I set can rotate to false, you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. It can't rotate on any of its axes now, which means it can't wobble. It can't fall over. I also can't make it turn left or right through basic physics on its own. I can still do it through other programmatic ways. I could, for example, say player : rotate, and then I could give it an X, a Y, and a Z value and some number of degrees, and that can still rotate it because that's not using the physics engine. That's just cheating and using direct access into this thing. But as far as physics is concerned, this thing can't turn anymore. Let's go ahead and run this and we'll see how it looks. And we can see my character now is still being acted on by physics. Once again, I have this very large square. It's just a single object that's scaled up really ridiculously large. And that is still a little bit funky on this thing. The thing hits, it bounces, and you can see it just kind of bounces in place. But really importantly, I'm going to run this again. And actually, I'm going to move the scene camera over to view this a bit more clearly. The alien drops about an inch, hits the ground, bounces several times, doesn't turn or rotate or lean or fall over because of this can rotate flag. Depending on what you are doing, you might want to use this. But there's a bunch of reasons why you might not want to use this as well, because there's a bunch of reasons why you might want your stuff to actually rotate. If you are creating a game where you want to have a fighter, like a jet fighter, that needs to roll and bank and, even something simple like I just want my item to be able to pitch upwards or downwards, you can't do that if this is set to false. Not without, as we said, doing it through other means. If you want physics to be able to rotate your stuff, you don't want to use this. But it can be really useful for stuff like this where I have a player character, they are a humanoid figure, I want them to remain upright, or I have some other object, I want it to remain upright, I don't want it to tilt or bank. We can use this. Before I continue, we have about 5 minutes left in this particular session. Does anyone have questions about anything?
William, this is Cole.
Yes.
Well, this is not exactly so much related to.
We can open up for broad questions as well right now. That's fine.
Yeah. So about the floor or
Yes.
the base platform of the game, on your screen it's a green floor.
Yes.
So basically, when you set the any item on specific spot on the game engine, it stacks up, right? So the first comes to the bottom, and the second one goes on top of it, and third one goes on top of it, and stuff like that. Thinking about that, I didn't really, well, my question is that, is there any way to, so let's say I forgot to install the floor.
Sure.
Can I, but I got the other object on my screen. Can I still put the floor underneath it?
Yeah, so working with the 3D editor, and I think I understand what you're saying, but correct me if at any point if I seem to be going off here. Like you're saying, with the 2D editor in particular, whenever you're doing something, you place an object, and then you place another object on top of that object, and then another on top of that one. And then you have these sort of layers of 2D items like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the 3D stuff, that's less so the case, because the way that the 3D environment works, the way that you can see things is just how close they are to the camera or how far away they are from the camera. So even if I went and I added something new to the scene right now, I could, just by positioning it in the right place, it will go where I need to. So for example, let me just say that I am going to go ahead, I'm going to just delete this entire floor. Everything is just hanging out in space now. On my screen, I have my dude, I have the smithy, I have that castle. There is no floor anymore. I don't need to run it to see what it's going to do, but I want to anyways. Oh, there he goes, dropping into the abyss. I would really like to have a floor back. The way that I can do this is the same way that I would add any other item. The order doesn't really matter here, at least not for the 3D. For this one, I'm just going to add back in the same thing that I had before. So I'm going to go to basic 3D. I'm going to select the cube because that's all that this ground was a cube. I'm now positioning a cube in space. If I look at this right now, Currently, its position is set to be 0 on the X, -1 on the Y. And this part's really important for the floor because I just want to make sure it's below other things, right? It's -1 on the Y and it's -7 for the Z value. I'm going to make this one so large, the Z value and the X value are not going to matter all that much. The Y value is what's really important to me here. Now, if I go and I place this somewhere, actually, before I even place it, I'm going to Control P. Before you place it, you can modify its properties, and these will hold over onto whatever you put. I'm going to name this the floor again. I'm going to give it the same scale it had before. It's 500 by 500. So it's this very large cube. I am going to, once again, I'm going to change its color value here. So there's 3 fields, the red, the green, the blue. I want it to just be green, so I'm going to make it 0% red. I will make it 50% green, so this will make it a sort of darker green. And then I will make it 0% blue. I'm going to press escape just to get out of the project properties, but I still want to be, I'm going to do it only once, so I'm still on my floor preview here. And if I place it, I've placed it back into the scene now. And so even though I might have built everything else up first and I forgot about the floor, that's kind of okay for 3D Engine. Just the position is what matters for 3D.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I'm going to run this and make sure that it still works the way I expect. Oh, I forgot to put the physics back on the floor. That's real important. All right, but any other questions? All right, so I think that we go straight into the next session. I don't think we have a break right now, right? Yeah, we go straight into the next one. So let's move on to talking a little bit about input. The most obvious thing that I would want to do here with my character is start moving them around. That being said, if you guys have peeked ahead at the lessons here, we're not getting there quite yet. That's going to be the one after the lunch break. We might end up skipping just a little bit ahead if we get there.
Should we offer people like a 5-minute break to kind of, you know, stretch their feet or whatever? I don't know if people
we can do that.
but
Yeah, that's a good call.
because I know some of the stuff can get pretty intense.
Okay, so yeah, with that, let's say we'll reconvene in, let's call it like, let's reconvene at 9:10. I need a moment to get up and stretch my legs and take care of something as well. So